Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So last night I ranked the past 10 Super Bowl winning champions. So I thought it'd only be fair if I went to the NBA and ranked the past 10 NBA champions. So let's get into the list here. In at number 10, we have the 2020 Bubble Lakers. I'm not trying to deny that this team didn't have talent. I'm not saying that. It was a really good team. Every team on this list was really good. However, there's a reason why people say this bubble ring doesn't count, is because the Lakers extremely benefited from this. Anthony Davis was given a lot more time to recover from his injury, as well as if you just compare the same Lakers team to what they did in the next two seasons outside of the bubble, kind of looking at what it would have been like had they not been in the bubble. 2021, they were the 7th seed, and they lost in the first round of the Suns. And 2022, they missed the playoffs. So I think people who try to brush over, the people who argue for, the bubble counts and all that and get mad when people say the bubble doesn't count, that's why. Because when you compare the Laker teams post-bubble, whenever they were outside of the bubble, whenever they were in an environment that extremely benefited their very old roster, they fell apart and crumbled. And that's why a lot of people don't think this ring holds as much value. And you just look at some of the teams they beat. I know you can only play who's in front of you, but just to compare championship teams, you have to look at some of the teams they beat. Portland in the first round, outside of Dame, kind of a mess. Houston in the second round, their center was a 6'5" PJ Tucker disaster, and they disbanded the next year. Conference final, you played the baby Nuggets, okay. They were kind of overachieving that year anyways. And then the Heat. The fact that Jimmy Butler took this series to 6 games basically on his own, because Bam Adebayo had injuries. Goran Dragic was on fire that playoff series. He had injuries. I think that's kind of embarrassing, because this on paper should have been a sweep. But Jimmy on his own basically took it to 6. I think that makes it, not as impressive for the Lakers. I think Jimmy had like a 40-point triple-double. He might have had 2. He was incredible. But yeah, I just think for all the reasons I said, this is probably the worst out of the past 10 champions. In at number 9, we have the Denver Nuggets from this past year, from 2023. And I think this just kind of goes to show how good championship teams, the fact that this team is at number 9, because this is a phenomenal team. Nikola Jokic, one of the most unguardable players, not even today, I think of all time, and arguably the best passer in the NBA, just surrounded by the perfect supporting cast of role players that fit his needs perfectly. You got scorers everywhere, shooters, Jamal Murray, KCP, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. They're all very gifted, versatile players that just fit Jokic's play style perfectly. So, great team. And I was even saying before, if this team can just get healthy, they're going to be a monster. And it just kind of makes sense that they won this. Now, the only reason they're not ranked a little higher is kind of similar to what we said about that Lakers team is they didn't really have any impressive win in the playoffs, at least in my opinion. Again, I'm trying not to put too much on that because I don't think it's fair to the champions. But again, when you're ranking them, you got to look at who they beat to get the championship. And I just don't really see a standout team. Ironically enough, the 2 bottom teams are the teams that beat the Heat in the finals, and they both went to 6 games, again, on Jimmy Butler going crazy. I found that kind of funny that he's the guy who led his team to play both the bottom teams on my list here. So, yeah, great team, great role players. Didn't really have a standout win, though, for me personally. I think you need at least one signature series win. But they handled their business. They got their first championship in franchise history, and Jokic had one of the all-time great playoff runs. Coming in at number 8, we have the 2022 Golden State Warriors. I think the worst rendition of the Warriors team that won titles in this past decade. However, I think that they have the most impressive win out of all the championship teams we've talked about thus far. That Boston Celtics team that they beat in the finals, on paper, probably should have won that series. I think that they were a better team. It's just Steph Curry had one of the all-time great finals performances. But Boston, they people forget how dominant the Boston Celtics were that season. They got off to a slow start, but after the turn of the calendar year, they had some, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was some ridiculous record. I want to say it was something like 30-5. It was something of that. It wasn't that exactly, but it was something like that ridiculous, how good the Celtics were. They had the top defense in the NBA that year. They had the defensive player of the year, Marcus Smart, on their team. Tatum was emerging as a superstar. Jaylen Brown, of course. We all remember, this wasn't that long ago. And Steph Curry, like I said, I think he had one of the biggest standout performances in Game 4 of that series because they were down 2-1. If they lose that game, they're down 3-1. We know how hard it is to come back from 3-1, especially the Warriors do. But, yeah, Game 4, I think, is one of the greatest final performances. That singular game, Steph Curry taking over that game, because they lose, the series is over. They lose the finals. But he takes it over, and they go on to win every other game in that series. And just a really good team that captured that lightning in a bottle at the perfect time. Andrew Wiggins played the best basketball of his career. He was the second best player on this team. Jordan Poole was a flamethrower off the bench. Clay had some good moments. Draymond was playing really good. This team hit they started playing their best basketball at the perfect time, and they got red hot and won the championship. Coming in at number 7, we have the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks. So I haven't been watching basketball that long, so I didn't get to see some, insane finals performances from obviously Jordan or Kobe or Shaq or guys like that, or even some of LeBron's early ones, when he was with Miami. With my 2 eyes that I watched live, this was the greatest finals performance that I've ever seen from an individual player was Giannis in the 2021 finals. The way that he was able to physically just dominate on both sides of the ball. Remember that block he had on that alley-oop from Ayton, to Ayton, I mean. And they were down 0-2 in the series to Phoenix. It looked like it was, the Suns were a shoo-in to win this. Then they go on to win 4 straight. And because Giannis just went completely insane. I think he had the greatest closeout game in the history of the NBA. Even Stephen A. said this back when it happened. He said it was the greatest closeout game in finals history. He had 50 points. I think he had like 6 blocks or something. He was just insane. The only reason I don't put them higher is because the supporting cast is good. I wouldn't say it's great. I just think that there's more well-rounded, talented teams. But this was a really good team as well. Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, really good bench. Mike Budenholzer actually got a ring. A lot of people say Mike Budenholzer isn't even a good coach, and, he got a ring. I think that's kind of funny. And they did also beat a really good Brooklyn Nets team. Like, we talked about the Nets, a couple days ago. Even though the Nets had their problems with their injuries to their big 3, Kevin Durant was playing arguably the best basketball of his career in that series against the Bucks. Go look at how ridiculous Kevin Durant was playing. I think KD was making a statement in that series as the best basketball player in the world. However, he loses and Giannis goes on to win the championship. And from then on, I've considered Giannis the best basketball player in the world. Coming in at number 6, we have the 2019 Toronto Raptors, their first championship in franchise history. Kawhi Leonard had one of the greatest playoff runs in the history of basketball, single-handedly basically destroying the Philadelphia 76ers' soul with one of the, I would say, outside of Ray Allen's shot in that finals, probably the best playoff game winner in the history of the league. Beating Philadelphia in that way, the Kawhi bounce, as it's been dubbed. And then going on in the conference final to beat the reigning MVP Giannis. And then in the finals, they beat the Dynasty Warriors. I know KD got hurt, but whatever. They still won the championship. And a lot of teams benefit from injury, so I'm not knocking the Raptors on that. The Warriors, they benefited in 2015 from injury, so I'm not going to knock the Raptors for playing an injured Warriors team, because even though KD and Clay got hurt, you still had Steph Curry playing. You still had, DeMarcus Cousins more than capable at that time still, and, good role players. So I'm not taking away from that at all. One of the best runs, like I said, from Kawhi. And this team was just the perfect collection of talent. You had so many, versatile players on this team that could do a lot of different things. Pascal Siakam had his breakout year, was the most improved player that year. Kyle Lowry, we know how scrappy he was. Fred VanVleet was a flamethrower in the finals, kind of aggravated me because I was cheering for the Warriors. He was he could not miss in the finals. Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol provided the perfect 1-2 punch on the defensive side of the ball, and was really a big reason why they beat the Bucks in that series, is this Ibaka-Gasol death trap defense. And of course, OG and some other guys that were really good and instrumental. Just a really good collection of talent, led by Kawhi, who at that time you could argue was threatening to be the best player in the world with how good he played in that playoff run. Kicking off our top 5 is the 2015 Golden State Warriors. I know that this team gets kind of lost in the shuffle because everyone thinks of the KD Warriors. Everyone thinks of them blowing the 3-1 lead in 2016, but this team was really, really good. This team really gave the Warriors that reputation for their strength in numbers because they had the best bench in the NBA. Their depth was insane, spearheaded by the best backcourt combination you could argue in the history of the league with Steph just entering his prime. Klay Thompson was, of course, incredible. And they won 67 games in that regular season. They were really good. They beat up on the Western Conference. And like I said about the Raptors, they definitely did benefit from some injuries to the Cavs. You know, the second and third best player to the Cavs were out for this series because Kenny Olynyk went full-on Khabib and just ripped Kevin Love's elbow out. Kyrie was hurt. But I want to say the Cavs did have a lead in this series. It's not like it was lopsided or anything. You know, LeBron still at this time was the best player in the world, had a 2-1 lead on this Warriors team going into Game 4 in Cleveland. So if they win that game, they probably win that series. So I don't like when people kind of overlook it and just say, you know, Kevin Love and Kyrie were hurt. They were still down in this series, and they still were a really, really good team. I still think it's BS that Iguodala won the Finals MVP because he quote-unquote clamped up LeBron. Well, yeah, LeBron still averaged 30. So I think that's crap. Steph definitely should have won the MVP of this Finals, but he did make up for it, obviously, a lot later on in his career. But, yeah, really good team. I think it kind of gets overshadowed by some of the other Warriors teams. In at number 4, we have the 2016 Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, as a Warriors fan, this gives me PTSD. I got so much crap for this, obviously, and it was deserved. You know, the only team to ever blow a 3-1 lead. I remember getting just shit on for this. But even as a Warriors fan, I have to give them credit. It is the most impressive finals win in the history of the finals. You know, 3-1 lead, only team to ever come back from that. And it definitely does. You know, I'm obviously not a LeBron guy at all, but it is kind of sweet, obviously, for him, the fact that he was able to bring a championship to Cleveland. They never had one in the history of their franchise. He's a Cleveland guy or an Akron kid and is able to bring the championship back. So it is cool for that. The only reason I didn't put them higher up on the list is like, yeah, the individual accomplishment of beating that Warriors team, extremely impressive. I just think from a talent perspective, there's more well-rounded, better teams out there. But yeah, if you put this at 1 just based on the fact that they came back from a 3-1 against a 73-win team, I'm not really going to argue with you too much. And at number 3, we have the 2014 San Antonio Spurs. I think that this is the highest IQ team to ever win a championship. The way that they just played team basketball and were able to take over this series and destroy the 2014 Heat, which obviously they were banged up, but you had peak of his powers LeBron James on that team, and they blew them out in record margin, won in 5 games. I just think the way they played as a team, I think the system, this is Popovich cooking. This was Popovich at his best from a scheme perspective. Just the way that this team worked together. They didn't really, they didn't have one guy to really just rely on. This was a very young Kawhi, won the Finals MVP kind of more for his versatility. Really, really old Tim Duncan, really old Manu, really old Tony Parker. But their IQ and their camaraderie as a team was able to come together for one of the most impressive performances in the Finals. For 1 and 2, I just combined them because they were the same team with some minor differences with the role players, but overall, same team. This is the greatest team ever assembled on paper. People always argue about, the 96 Bulls that won 72 games with Jordan and all that. Obviously, it's impossible to do a hypothetical. I would just rank this team higher because of a talent perspective to have Steph Curry and Kevin Durant in their primes. I think you can argue those are 2 top 10 players of all time on the same team. Anytime that happens, you have one of the best teams ever and a phenomenal supporting cast. Klay Thompson was still an all-star level player. Draymond Green in 2017 won Defensive Player of the Year. Phenomenal supporting cast. Sean Livingston was great. Iguodala was really good. JaVale McGee revitalized his career here. The first year, Zaza was there, of course. Remember Zaza, how much of a clown he was. But yeah, I just combined them. We know how great this team was. It was unfair. They were just mopping the floor with the league, especially that first year. They won 67 games in the regular season, and then they went on to I'm trying to just think off the top of my head if they lost a game in the Western Conference playoffs in 2017. I think they beat the Blazers in the first round. The second round, I think, was the Jazz, I want to say. And then the Spurs, where Zaza landed on Kawhi's foot. They might have lost one game in there. Or no, I think they actually did sweep through. because I think their only loss was to the Cavs in the finals. And then, of course, KD has the phenomenal shot. Probably his signature career-defining move is hitting that shot in LeBron's face to win that game. And then, of course, the next year kind of did the same exact thing. They weren't quite as dominant in the playoffs. I think they lost the game to the Pelicans in 2018. They weren't quite as dominant, but again, they swept the Cavs. The Cavs were obviously a lot less talented. They didn't have Kyrie in 2018, but the Warriors, they did sweep. So that has been my past 10 champions in the NBA ranked. Go ahead and let me know your list in the comments. And if you made it this far, really appreciate you listening to me ramble. Please go ahead and leave a like and subscribe.